Okay, why don't we begin? Welcome to Post-Human Infrastructure, second out of 7 classes. I wanted to introduce our visiting listener this week, Mauricio Chavez. We're so happy to have you. Let's start, Mary Rose, by reading from the description of the class again.
Thank you so much, and hello everyone. In this course, we will explore the concept of post-human infrastructure through the construction of speculative ecologies centered around water-based ecozones. We will start by examining the ways in which human infrastructure has impacted these ecozones and identify the challenges that they face. Each student will choose a specific ecozone and explore it in depth, asking themselves what their biggest concern for this area is. We will be reading James Bridle's Ways of Being and other essays by authors that focus on water and the underland to provide a theoretical foundation for our exploration. Students will work together in groups to create solutions embedded in speculative ecologies, incorporating insights from their individual research and group discussions. By the end of this course, students will have developed a deep understanding of the complex relationships between human infrastructure and natural systems. They will have developed the skills to imagine and create innovative solutions that prioritize sustainability and the well-being of the ecosystems they inhabit.
Thank you. And now let's do some popcorn introductions. If you could just say your name, Mary Rose, and where your pronouns and where you're calling in from today, and then choose somebody else on the platform to introduce themselves.
Thank you. I'm Mary Rose. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm calling in right now from Antibes, France. And I'm learning a lot about the indigenous culture here, being around tribal Gaelic communities. And I'm going to popcorn over to Beatrice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Steinert. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I will pop it over to Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm calling from San Francisco. My pronouns are she and they. I'll bounce it to Jess.
Can't hear you.
Oh, was I muted? I'm Teresa. My pronouns are she, they. I'm home with a sick kid today, so I might be a little distracted. Sorry.
No worries. It's all part of it. Thank you for joining. Where are you calling in from?
I'm back in San Francisco now.
Okay.
And I'll bounce it to Jess.
I'm Jess. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am in West Virginia, Appalachia, Cherokee, Shawnee land originally, and I'm so happy to be here. Okay, Jamie, please. Jamie Grace. Hey, Jamie, will you go next?
Hi, yes. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technology trouble today, but I think I just sorted it out. So I'm here and I'm calling in. I'm Jamie Grace, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm calling in from Palm Springs, California. I will popcorn it over to the lovely Mauricio.
Wait, there's a, oh, okay, the track just went away. Hi, good to see you, Jamie. Good to see you all. Thanks, Lauren, for inviting for today. I'm excited to discuss this text, especially the lovely Annette Singh. I am talking from Los Feliz in Los Angeles, and my pronouns are he, him, and I will pop out to Rui César Campos.
Oi, Maurício, tudo bom?
Tudo bem.
Hi, everyone. I am Rui César Campos. I am speaking from Fortaleza, Brazil, and my pronouns are he, him. And I'll pop up to Jack Rendler.
Hello, my name is, thank you, Rui. My name is Jack. I'm calling in from Los Angeles. He, him pronouns. Very happy to be here with all of you. Looking forward to the class. I'll pass it to Michelle Pearson.
Hello, I'm Michelle. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in today from Philadelphia, PA. I will pass it over to Rainey. Have you gone yet? Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I have two screens. I had to find my mouse. I'm Rainey. I'm calling from San Rafael, California. My pronouns are she, her, and I am going to pass it on to, correct me if I don't say your name right, Jula?
You got it close enough. My name's Julu. I go with she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Philadelphia, PA. And I'll pass it off to Harold.
Good morning, everyone. Harold calling in from Kilauea, Kauai, land of the Hawaiian people. I go by he, him. I'll pass it on to Alexandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Providence, Rhode Island, the ancestral land of the Narragansett and Wampanoag people. I use she, her pronouns. And I want to thank Beatrice for joining us today, too, as a visiting artist. And I will pass it on to Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. She, her, they, them pronouns. And I will pass it over to Jess.
I'll say hello again. And who hasn't gone? Anybody?
I think Yeva and Mohit, and so either one of you. Yeva, you want to jump in?
Hi, I'm Yeva. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Glendale. And I'll pass it on to Nicholas.
Kia ora, my name is Nicholas. I use he, him pronouns. I'm calling in from Te Mata Maui in New Zealand, and I'll pass it on to Mohit.
Hello, I'm Mohit. I use he, him pronouns. I'm calling from Delhi, India. I'm very happy to join here. Yeah. I hope everyone is done.
I think
no one is the person.
Elias hasn't gone yet.
Huh? Elias?
Welcome, Elias. Would you like to say hello, say your name and where you're calling in from?
Okay. Well, welcome, Elias. We're glad you can partly join us. Maybe you can hear us. Send us a thumbs up if you can. Well, thank you, everybody. I wanted to leave a minute of time and space to acknowledge the time and space that separate us. We're all calling in from different continents. We're calling in from different time zones. We're calling in from different seasons. We're calling in from, you know, all kinds of different patterns of how our bodies exist in weather, in space, in time, in ritual. I wanted to also call in that it's the day after the full moon. Yesterday was the full pink moon in Aries with Libra rising. So for those of us living in the Northern Hemisphere, that means springtime, which has a way of connecting to color, which is why it's called up here a pink moon. I wanted also to call in that we formed a bond a week ago. Together, we had a special first class, and I just wanted to honor that moment and the time that separates us, to leave some space and time for any reflections on any of that any of you would like to share. Then I'm going to start with a breath exercise today. The theme of this class is time in relationship to spatial ideas. So based on our free writing last week, I thought a good way to frame this second class in post-human infrastructure would be to talk about the way that we can connect to glacial time. So from the minuscule to the post-apocalyptic is not just based in the now, it's based in the big picture of flow and what we're a part of. And sometimes getting into something regular, like our breath, excuse me for my assistant outside who will be interjecting some barks from time to time. I want to invite us to get into our other than human connectedness through a very ancient practice of breathing. And I'm calling on this from, you know, and it sings the mushroom at the end of the world. You know, Sing states that in each case of Matsutake ecology and economy, that she embarks on, she finds herself surrounded by patchiness. That is a mosaic of open-ended assemblages of entangled ways of life, with each further entering into a mosaic of temporal rhythms and spatial arcs. I love the description of life as temporal rhythm, especially when thinking about life and breath. Breath is ultimately rhythm. It carries the song of our life. So this morning or this evening or this afternoon or wherever this Zoom finds you, I want to highlight the breath as an audible vessel of rhythm by way of Ujjayi breath, also known as ocean breath, because it sounds like an ocean. It's also sometimes known as a victorious breath. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Ujjayi breath has been used for thousands of years to enhance yoga practice. The sound of Ujjayi provides us help to synchronize breath with movements during yoga, making the entire yoga practice more rhythmic. With Ujjayi breath, you breathe in and out of the nose with your lips sealed. No breath passes the lips. This also helps to heat in the body. The lips gently close, and although the breath is passing through the nostrils, the emphasis is in your throat. Give it a try. How I like to think about Ujjayi breath is to take your hand as if it's a small handheld mirror and bring it close to your mouth like so, as if covering a yawn. Inhale through the nose deeply. And as you exhale out, as if you're fogging the mirror with your breath, let's do it a few times together with your microphones on. Breathe in and fog the mirror. So this idea I have is that we're now creating a patchwork ecology of our breaths around the world together, like in Anat Singh's patchwork ecology. We are, in a sense, encouraging our metabolism to be here now collectively. So in this way, let's continue for a couple of minutes to explore this patchwork breath with an audible tempo. And if you want to breathe this panting breath or a lion's breath, that's cool too. Just do whatever feels right. I'm going to set up a timer for a couple of minutes so we can kind of record our collective patchwork breath. Okay, couple minutes beginning now. Are you done with work? Same question. Does anybody have anything they would like to share about the full moon or the time that's passed since our last class in relationship to being present or intimacy or forming a cohort?
That's probably as close to physical presence as we can get. this way. It's a great connector.
Thank you, Michelle. And I wanted to connect this again to Anna Tsing's very first chapter, where she asks us before we really read anything about the Matsutake or the mushroom at the end of the world, to get into the art of noticing. And that gets us connected to James Bridle, who asks us to really think about revising that interface between technology and biology by being present in real time and space for learning. And it's a challenge in these interfaces to do that collectively. But in moving into the idea of a speculative ecology that we're co-creating, it's important to think about these authors that we're looking at, including our own collective speculative ecologies, about being stones in some kind of flow of a creative river that the Alternative Art School is a part of, saying we're a part of something that's a child of the pandemic. But one of the things that being a child of the pandemic means is that we have an opportunity to notice all these things that connect us, even when we're separated through vast spaces and times. So one of the things that connects us is the moon, and that was last night. And so I wanted to start by saying, what did you notice?
Well, it was a big ass moon where from my vantage point, on my friend's back porch while we were having a Passover dinner and talking about the pink moon and the peepers, the spring peepers.
My own pandemic baby noticed the pink moon. And we're just unpacking from a trip, and I was just, running laundry, and my daughter goes, "Mom, the moon is pink." And it was huge and framed in this kind of arch window. And I don't have one of those iconic San Francisco views. So I just sort of forget that we have this amazing Seven Hills view, and it was framed. It reminded me of Manhattan Hedge when I lived in Manhattan, when the sun would go down right over Houston Street. It was just beautiful.
For me, in the past days, I felt a bit like a lightning strike, like something was like a lot of agitation and electricity in my body. And then yesterday throughout the day, it started to diminish a little bit. And today it feels like a new cycle has emerged. And I feel this often with full moons, but I always forget to keep track of the full moon. So I know it's a full moon and I should expect to feel this way. So that's how I encountered this full moon.
I've been having a few days where I've been really hitting the solar plexus with a loss of stability. Lots of people who have helped me manage a lot of complexity have unexpectedly disappeared without conversation. That does not include Mary Rose, by the way, who I knew was disappearing and is still here. So she's the opposite. She brings stability. But I just couldn't believe how many things happened in such rapid succession. And then I realized that, did I just pin Jamie Grace? Interesting. I just realized that I come from, my background is Jewish, and yesterday was the beginning of an annual ritual reenactment of Exodus, from the familiar to the unfamiliar. And the familiar was slavery and the unfamiliar was freedom. But it's still really scary to move between places in life. Whatever's familiar becomes familiar. And there's a certain amount of familiarity with that, which is helpful, especially in times of pestilence and plague. So I realized in the full moon that maybe I was meant to have this embodied experience of vulnerability right now, because it also calls on the potential of freedom to not need those things at any given moment. Like getting through that is a recognition that actually I'm fine. It's just letting go of the illusion of control, the illusion that certain things appear necessary are not really necessary. And sometimes the key to freedom is liberation from the things that you think you need. So maybe that's something that I got out of this full moon that I wanted to share.
That's so beautiful. I've felt between Alex and Lauren, your shares, myself, I was in travel mode, traveling from Los Angeles to France, and with a time difference and language difference, and staying with my partner's family for a Passover Seder, and felt this kind of stretch of my being, stretching between time zones and space and time, and still being connected to this course, and kind of in like a dream world almost of half sleeping and then half realizing, oh, it's time for the course and it's time for having dinner, and watching the moon rise over, when I was in Paris, watching the full moon rise over the buildings is the thing that helped orient me into the now. Just seeing that beaming bulb come up over the infrastructure and remind me of right now.
I can add, I was thinking of two things. First, like from an astrology standpoint, the full moon being on the kind of Aries Libra axis, where Aries governs the self and Libra kind of governs relationships. I've been thinking a lot recently about kind of like the relationships that I build in my daily life, and starting to kind of notice this connection between like my professional work. I work as a fundraiser, but development, but I kind of refer to it as resource mobilization, because I think a lot, outside of the terms of money, but a lot of what I do is centered on networking, building relationships. And I tend to find that all of these relationships feed into one another. So I have a lot of friends who are in the environmental space. And when I talk to them about how amazing this class was and how excited I am to work in this area, I've connected with them, and it's just kind of all fed into one another in this really beautiful way. So that was like the first thing I was thinking. And the second thought that I had just about the full moon in general, I have an upcoming trip to Yosemite, and I'm really excited to take some space photos. I have an old DSLR camera that I totally forgotten how to use. So the night before the actual full moon, when the sky was really clear here, I spent like 2 hours on my balcony trying to get an image of the moon. And I've done it before, but I just couldn't get it. And I started to realize that I kept having to change my position because it was moving so rapidly through the sky that I'm just like, wait, I'm set up here now, but like it's gone. And I felt like I kind of lost the moment, but I'll try again on another night. But yeah, that was just another thought.
Hi, I'd love to share. Lauren, thank you for that lead. That was a really relevant and relatable experience for me as well. And last night during the full moon, I was out on the water. We took a boat. We managed to find a boat, and we were out on the water of the Salton Sea, testing depths and looking at little inlets and getting to places that you normally couldn't get to on foot. And because the moon was so full and bright, it guided our path, and we got to be with it and talk about how maybe as humans we don't get enough moonlight these days. We get a lot of sunlight, but maybe we could get more moonlight. And it was just incredible to be out in the evening doing, stuff on water, being so close to the moon. And one of our cohort said when they were a small child, they would take a boat out and they didn't realize the optical illusion of the moon, and they would try to chase the moonlight on the water. And every time they would go closer, it would get further and further away. So it was very, very palpable to be that close to moonlight with nothing else around and the quietude of the sea.
Well, thank you everybody for sharing. And now let's move to the readings of our collective writing. I'm going to start with the writing prompt, and let's explore randomness this time in terms of how we read our 3-minute responses, one after the next. Let's just sit in silence until somebody feels like reading, and read for as long as it takes, but try and leave it short so we have time to respond and process it afterwards. And if possible, after each person reads, let's do a breath collectively together as a form of punctuation between the two. So here was the writing prompt. If you didn't have time to do the assignment, feel free to add in your response extemporaneously. The free writing is meant to be that, a suggestion about processing this thought and layering your voice into the construction of this speculative ecology we're co-creating. So the writing prompt. From thinking minuscule to thinking planetary, let's grapple with questions of how to bridge different scales and create connections between them. As inspired by James Bridle's chapter, Seeing Like a Planet. Quote, time has always been an imaginary concept, and it matters who imagines it. The lens required now is not a microscope, but a macroscope, a device for seeing at a far vaster scale, both in space and time, than we're used to. James Bridle tells us, how do we move beyond the short attention spans of our knowledge-making technologies? What time-based technologies, stories, and tools need to be reimagined or created from scratch to expand our conscious attention and attune us to the temporal dimension of the web of life and the rhythm of changes caused by climate change and anthropocentric activities? Elias, your hand's up. Would you like to start? So I leave it open. Whoever wants to start with their reading, go for it.
I can start. And I also just want to thank you all so much for including me in your session today. I'm really excited to kind of think with you all through these readings. Yeah, so I'll start by reading what I had written down. I think of expanding our temporalities as concerned not so much with what tools or technologies, but the way that we use those tools. So the intention that we bring to them. Becoming attuned to the temporalities of other beings is about process just as much, or perhaps even more than the end goal. For example, James Reynolds talks about the setting up of a time lapse of a plant and then playing it back in a condensed time frame, which makes it appear animate at the level of the kind of human scale of animacy. But I would argue that what we come away with, a more intimate sense of its motion if we attend to how we are making a time lapse and what we choose to do with the resulting images. But just by playing a time lapse back to ourselves in a condensed time frame, we are, I think, really just merely bringing the plant into our own human time capacities rather than really attempting to join its world. So what if, instead of relying on automation, for example, to take images for us, we make sure to be there to click the shutter every hour? Or when we then take the resulting images sequences and break them down and try to grasp not just how the plant is moving, but the particular rhythms of the way that it's moving. Or better yet, and I think a lot about this as a biologist and a historian of biology, if we took the time to draw each time frame instead of relying on the camera-made image. All of these are different approaches to time lapse give us really a qualitatively different relationship to the being we were trying to connect with. And then I just wanted to add, as someone who spends a lot of time in the microscopic world, as a cell and developmental biologist, that I guess I have a little bit of a bone to pick with this kind of idea of moving away from microscopes as tools for accessing other than human temporalities. A lot of things happen even within animals, and animal cells happen much too slowly for us to see in given time frames. So that's a way in which I think we as animals are already connected to plants in interesting ways. And I specifically spend a lot of time looking at embryos. I'm an embryologist. And when I look at an embryo, specifically an egg, I really feel like I'm looking back in time. I'm looking back over 1 billion years of evolutionary history, back to a time when we shared a common ancestor with common single-celled ancestor with plants and fungi. Yeah, I guess I just want to kind of push and put out there that microscopes can be tools for expanding temporality in ways that perhaps might even be, allow us to access timescales even broader than macroscopic tools.
I might comment on Beatrice's sharing. No? Okay.
I'd like to share next what I wrote. Use beyond usefulness, function, purpose, meaning. How can we escape these concepts if we are bound by a time scale? The time scale of our lives, what, 100 years? Does thinking beyond our lifetimes affect what we do with our time? Is it because of our feeling of limited time that we in fact consume without limits? Shift from accumulation of the natural, of the material as a definition of a well-lived life. Is accumulation the only way for us? The mountain I just passed is gone from my view on this train. It still catches clouds and brings the water down to us. If I were to blow it up, will the rain pass us by faster than the moving train I am in? What is natural? Will it ever be natural again? Does it have to eliminate human beings to be natural? Can we be natural? Is all the natural? Because we have the capacity to destroy, we have the obligation to steward. Time in city changes. Time in a city changes. different infrastructure means less ability to learn from my surroundings. Only sunlight, clouds, plants, animals, growth, seasons. And I like the idea of breathing after that.
I'll go. I want to preface this by saying I've worked for the past 20 or so years developing technology as a designer, so I have a lot of feelings about this and some PTSD. So this is what I wrote. How can technology widen time? How can it respond to body time? Even this current prompt causes me time anxiety. A question that impacts me at the speed of technology, the pace of business that demands an immediate response. Rather, how can we feel into things and trust the unfolding of creativity? How do we plant and nurture a seed? How do we set the conditions? Where can we listen rather than force answers to appear on schedule? I need to break these questions down into smaller parts, to place them in my organs and muscles to germinate, so they can work their way through to consciousness changed. Even writing by hand rather than on a device changes my method of thinking. I search for solutions and outcomes on a computer. I look to brainstorm on sticky notes that were once trees, looking for packaged processes like design thinking, the design of my tools shaping what can be thought. There are so many possible questions needed to simply begin. What is slow technology? What is a technology that works at the speed of the body in motion? What is a technology that privileges moving as knowledge versus the static, stationary world of the human mind? What is a technology that engenders the wisdom of a 1,000-year-old tree? What is technology that reveals the experience of other minds and ways of being to expand our own? How can we translate tree time to impart an experience of deep time and expose the consequences of current actions and behaviors? A technology that gives an embodied experience of human decentering. How do interfaces need to change? What can data be? How do different forms of data shift our perspectives? How can time be represented and experienced as an emergent flow? How can technology facilitate communication between the human and the more than human world? What is technology that shapes us differently, whole rather than fractured, present in our bodies and entangled with the more than human world? What is the tool for collaboration that partners with other intelligences? So many questions.
I can read next. I'll start. A macroscope as a form of speculative ecology about water, and how might we become aware of pollution levels, temperature, of what flows in and through water. As John Didion said, in the movement of water through aqueducts and siphons and pumps and forebays and afterbays and weirs and drains and plumbing on the grand scale. I don't even know what a forebay is. As soon as I'm done with this free writing exercise, I will Google each word to insert into my mental model the exact image. But I want to go and visit. I want to follow the movement of water through John Didion's list. Through how many pieces of human-made infrastructure that does water pass? I have never put time and water together, how water moves through time and in time, and how long it takes for a type of slow violence to manifest itself in our perception. It takes a very long time, particularly with the knowledge that is invisible to our senses, or that it is a hyperobject in itself, simultaneous and too abstract to grasp. How can we connect with the water and its temporal dimension? Thinking of the macroscope, I remember a few years ago reading a paper by artist Tiffany Holmes on eco-visualization, where she proposed combining art and technology to reduce energy consumption. I believe she has something like whether creative visualization of real energy consumption pattern can trigger ecological responsible behaviors. I wonder what this means for the human freshwater relationship. I can't remember if she mentioned this or not, but maybe she did. She mentioned that what was important is the maintenance of consciousness around a particular problem, of continuously and consciously training one's attention to become aware, to feel, to see, to build a mental model, similar to Robert Marsham's logbook technology, perhaps only with a much more complex infrastructure and coordination. I think of the macroscope as such a form of creative visualization, as a way to attune ourselves to moving knowledge, the knowledge of what is in the water, the pollution level, the temperature levels, beyond water as a commodity, water as a resource, water that flows on our paved surfaces, is the water that is life itself, the one that is overlooked, the one that is divided into salt water and fresh water, the one that lives in our bodies, and the ones that clouds are made of. Buckminster Fuller's geoscope also comes to mind as a macroscope. The geoscope was a tool of facilitating collective understanding, cooperation, coordination of mental models, and visualizing interconnectedness. It was meant to create a 3D map of the Earth, displaying real-time information such as weather patterns. I think of the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the water cycle. I think of the macroscope as a geoscope because I wonder what kind of real-time data we need to collectively attune ourselves to the urgency of the situation, to that is our ecosystem, also as a tool of empathy and care. Can real data help, or do we need to go entirely back to a more embodied state of being in relationship with the land, with seasonal change, with the more than human world? I think we need a combination of both. I think of Bryle's point of making time lapses versus watching time lapses, and how it is important to be in relationship to what changes over time and how. Sorry, that was very long.
I can go now. And I'll paste the text so you can follow. Just a second. Just a second. So it's also long. There's a Yoruba aphorism that says, Eshu killed a bird yesterday with the stone that he threw today. Eshu is an Orisha that carries principles of Yoruba cosmology. It is a dynamic spatial-temporal element that constitutes the principle of differentiated existence, from which it develops, mobilizes its growth, and communicates. Humans, animals, fish, and plants all have their own Eshu. As advocated by the Brazilian thinker Muniz Sodré, Nagô thought first does not take the self as the figure of the foundation of subjectivity, but a differential and pre-individual unity, Eshu, invested with a potency, Axé, whose intensity unfolds in the ontogenetic development of the individual. Second, the representations of Nagô thought are not absolute, but infrapropositional, since they are inscribed in a random and non-deterministic movement. Thinking about an archaeology of subjectivity, Sodré points out that Eshu implies an unsubjectivist conception of personality. Eshu is both ancestral and descendant. Its continuity occurs in death, which is life. It is a cosmovision opposed to the punctual, infinite, and quantified continuum that is the synthesis of the Western representation of time. The key to the aphorism about Eshu lies in reversibility. With Eshu, there is no beginning or end because everything is a process, and as each reality is constituted, it affects others beyond space and time. In cyclical or solar terms, the rising coexists with the setting because of the force of now. This means that the event manifests itself by inaugurating something new in the present, but in a dynamic of retrospection, the past that changes, and of prospection, which occurs in the making possible. The event is not itself temporal, that is, it is not in a determined horizon, but it is temporalizing, it found time. Eshu is not a constituted temporality, but a constituent one, a dimension of experience that invents time. It constructs in time, which is that of reversibility, offering and sacrifice. The energy that moves lives towards reversibility, what is exchanged and what is sacrificed, is Ashe. As Sodré said, experience it as real, accumulable, and transmissible content through bodily mediation. Ashe presides over the cycle of symbolic exchange, giving and receiving, making the community codes work, being both individual, collective, pre-individual, and personal. The intensification of this energy occurs in the Nagô Arqué through the principle of joy. Here, joy is understood not as a state of the one who feels, but as the regency of life. Unlike happiness, sought as an end by the subjectivity of the desiring subject, joy transcends the desire to be happy because it does not result from the blind sizer of desire, but from a drive and power of realization that moves Ashe, the energy of life present in animals, technologies, humans, languages, etc. This worldview is manifested in present actions, both present both in the codes of Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and in artistic, cultural, and spiritual expressions of Capoeira Angola. These are manifestations of Afro-Brazilian culture that have cultivated joy as life resistant at the end of a day of exploitation against the horrors of plantations. Ashe. In this brief summary of time in the Jeje Nagô cosmology, I find some principles that should guide speculative infrastructural creations capable of responding to climate change without perpetuating the linear logic of Western progress, reversibility, alacrity, and circularity. The concluding question and result is, how can infrastructure design and engineering incorporate these principles and articulate with the modern human world, taking into account Ashe, the energy present in all matter, and Eshu, the force that mediates the movement of this power in all things. Yeah, that's it. It's long, but the question was like really huge. You know, like I woke up and saw the question, was like, oh my God, I have to think all this now. And I went to this book that I really love. It's Nagô Thinking by Muniz Sodré. I think it's like a Nagô media theory. You know, there's the German media theory, network archaeology, media archaeology. Muniz Sodré constitutes a kind of Nagô media theory based in Afro-Brazilian thinking. It's really nice. And he has this reflection on time based in Eshu, so that's where I went to answer it. Thanks.
I'll go. It sounds like my
Hello?
neighbors. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's it. Okay. You are better. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll go mine short, and I think my neighbor's yard blower might kick up. I gave my child a meadow instead of a lawn. Pollinators live here. I am wondering when the butterflies will be back, their chrysalis and stasis. When will the nuptial flights be? The day when the ants with wings go out to create empires. Someone will successfully run 2 ant colonies for a time, teeny tiny boss ladies. I'm looking at my garden. Did I take it too far? Are these old lady flowers? Are the daffodils actually nepotism? They're called narcissus. Is this garden actually my Nepo baby? I'll show you guys. It's a lot. Like 200 daffodils.
Yay.
Thank you.
Hello, I don't know if I can speak now or anyone want to say something more.
Elias, please feel free
Okay.
to speak.
Okay, I waiting permission. Okay, I just want to say something about the moon, and I will be back about technology a little bit. Just because I am living in south of this continent, so I don't see the pink moon. But anyway, every day I see this how moon move in our beach, how it's make waves up and down. So what I see that our world have influenced from something outside. So we should know that not everything come from our inside. So something sometimes come from outside and touch us and have effect about us. And about how we call this pink moon. Maybe it is not pink moon. Maybe it is just we think that is pink. Just maybe it is influence of optic, something like this. But because we are artists, because we like to see the life beautiful, for that we call this pink, and we like to be positive. So maybe in another for other people it is looking for something terrible, something for shaming, something not good. So what I want to say that we see the world and we can make this world beautiful or no. So for that, the artist, it is very important to have a place or to have a stamp in this world to make this world beautiful. Anyway, about about technology, what I see that now in globalization and technology, they're both move our life. So now we are in a world that becomes like a little city everywhere, and we can see everything very quickly by internet, by social media, by our communication very fast. So our world looking it is same. And if we think how we can find solution about natural problem, we should back to nature, because the balance it is basic rules in nature. So why this is two ideas, but it is very important, because the new technology and the globalization and they sell for us some ideas, and we start to think these ideas it is the ideal for our world. This is the best idea, and we don't know that every side of this world have a speciality, have his kind of identity. So if we think how we can make this world nice again, we should respect this identity in different civilization, culture, language, color. So I think it is very interesting to back to everyone to his identity, to make this world again nice. I don't know exactly how it is happens, but we can start to think, and we can start to believe in ourselves, how we can make this and how we can change this if we can change. So I think it is working by to back to natural balance and to good using of technology technology to don't make them dominate our life, our world. Maybe with this terrible technology, we will lose our humanity. So I think we should think also about how to use this technology, how to make this technology in our service, not make them use us to make this all what we see now. And maybe if we don't stop this, we will be have more problem, more disaster. So just I like to say this.
I'd like to read. Time is sound. After weathering a long winter in Berlin and waking up with the spring, I knew I would be leaving soon, on foot for a long walk. It was rising summer, and I had been preparing for this for 3 or so years. In England, I walked for an hour and a half to my studio and back, 3 hours almost a day. I would lose myself in time and space. In Italy, I used my legs to go up and down the hill, ascending and descending to La Macina di San Cresi. In Norway, I walked with my friend Rachel, who was more of an intense walker than I was. In every country, I brought tools and gifts to give wherever was possible. One of those tools was a process called constellations, a way of moving with specific emotions through time and space. I once heard an Israeli architect say, "Don't look in time for what you lost in space." I had always wanted the time to drop into the vast landscape. What would it be like to drop into a grand scale and propel myself across a long line, a moving point, drawing this imaginary line in time and space, the ephemerality of what would go beyond land art, instead of an imposition on the land itself, working with, moving with, and leaving no trace. Like the equator or the prime meridian, it's there, but it's not really there, holding the line. Perhaps the line is the first relationship to time and space. Perhaps this is why we have thought about it as a visual thing. We are moving towards systems of greater complexity. Add a line, add a line, add a line. I wanted to look like a casual walker, to be easeful. I wore a dress and I had a hammock, a life straw, these really flexy bendy shoes. I sawed off the handle of my toothbrush, which was unnecessary and stupid. My friend Moritz gave me a knife and let me practice my hammock arrangement in his parents' backyard. And then I went. I followed the waterways. A remarkable thing that emerged was after 4 hours and 32 minutes, I would have to stop. My body had real limits. My soul felt limitless. The straps of the bags, even though light, would demand that I would stop, and I would stop until I could go again. The stop was a physical demand that I couldn't ignore, but the rest had no rhyme or reason. Sometimes I stayed for an hour, sometimes I was ready in 15 minutes, and sometimes I would need to languish the day. There was no specific predictability about rest. I thought of the Aborigines and how they stop on their walkabouts to let their souls catch up to them. What's more, the deeper I went, my heartbeat filled my head, my legs, my temples. I swear I could feel my heartbeat in my feet as I walked. And this thought hit me. What if time is sound? What if that's why it's relative, like literally relatives, because it begins with our own hearts and we are all connected in this way. We all have them. Perhaps as humans, we have made monumental leaps of consciousness around space. And the issue with many things we don't fully understand yet is because we don't fully understand time. We look at a watch, but that is a visual representation of something you can't exactly see at all. So now this time concept never leaves me. What if our next big leap as collective consciousness is in time? What if many things that seem mysterious will become clear as we grow together as a humanity to show the understanding of deeper elements about time? What if time is sound? Thank you.
I can read next. As a digital practitioner from a mining town, I am keenly conscious of both restorative and extractive land practices. From what might be considered landfill, I seek to open up underworlds of livability, cycles of renewal enabled by decomposition as a guiding principle. My research engages intimately with the emissive materiality of digitization to ask which ways art can metabolize the screen. I wanted to learn the life-supporting potential of luminosity through embodied practice, encapsulating breath as neon. The widespread dependent use of screens to the demise of landscapes and landfills demanded a counter pathway. My practice became that reconciliation. By using blown glass tubes emitting neon and UV light to support decomposer fungi, photosynthesizing bacteria, moss, and algae, I invite more than human timescales and provide a space for reevaluation. Through embodied storytelling, I aim to advocate for direct alliances with the organisms that support our ability to live.
I'll share what I wrote. Generations or glacial time, terrestrial time or geological time, relative confluences and dynamics of energy in the biosphere generate their own temporal dimension. As energy shifts between the plants and the earth, they are defining a rate of energy exchange and pace of creation. The relative functioning of organisms and environments may define something like time, but not in the fixed monotony we have come to understand time as. It may be thought of as phases or seasons. Perhaps the dynamics of time that the earth follows have seasonal temporal realities. If we thought of a geotemporal dimension for design projects, life cycles for projects would be cyclical and would engage the energy dynamics of large ecosystems. Watersheds, tides, migrations would all be a calculation for the overarching transformation of an environment. Projects would have a phasing of evolution to engage the dimensions of the biosphere in terms of the temporal processes. Environmental visions of projects can have temporal dimensions to them. There could be the longevity of visions that cast forward the speculative projected futures of projects as they relate to geotemporal realities. Our cities are multi-generational projects of creation. Cathedrals are multi-generational projects. What kind of multi-generational projects are there for environmental artists? Instrumentation can allow us to visualize the futures of geotemporal relationships in ecologies.
Harold Elga. Time, planet, me, us. Once upon a moment, a wizened friend trained at large planetary scale concepts like paleoclimatology opened me up to direct experience of planetary time. As we traipsed through a valley in Ojai, California, There, visible clearly in the bluffs and rises, strata, layers and layers of sentiment representing no, collected over the course of tens of thousands of years from just as long ago. And these layers represented bottom surfaces from way back when that were now contorted, undulated, bent, propelled sideways, upheaval, and seeming apocalypse, not human-born, too giganormous, happening so slowly that would make it impossible for my human eyes to watch and perceive, and yet there I was, partaking in awe at Gaia's wristwatch.
I'll read. How can we see time transcend into the big and small? Do we make ourselves smaller and make our minds minuscule spaces? No. We show up as who/what we are and look at the shoulders readily available to stand on. A new perspective will make the micro humongous and the macro close to mundane. Seeing through the eyes of those who did the work inspires a continual curiosity. Through past, present, and future, time records the stream of consciousnesses that have lived through major events, yet in a matter of a few sentences, these major events and lives turn into words with varying levels of meaning. Time can't be tamed, nor can it be stopped, but through the processing of the living and non-living, I can assume that time isn't meant to be controlled, but to inspire those to partner with those who understand the temporary space we have with it. That's all I have.
I can go. First, I'd just like to say, listening to everyone's reading is making me want to completely rewrite what I wrote and inspired me to write something different, but I'll just read what I wrote anyway. James Bridle urges us to transcend our smaller scale thinking and embrace a macroscope that reveals the world on a vaster scale than we've seen before. Time, Bridle reminds us, is an imaginary construct, but it matters who holds the lens. To truly understand the web of life and the impact of climate change and human activity, we need to reimagine time itself. We need tools, stories, and frameworks that connect the micro to the macro and bridge the gaps between different scales. Data visualization tools can help us reveal the long-term patterns of climate change. Stories passed through generations can help us trace the history of landscapes and ecosystems over millennia. Shifting frameworks can encourage us to value the long-term health of the planet over short-term gains. But this is not just an intellectual exercise. To truly see the world on a larger scale, we need to cultivate new habits of attention, to slow down and attune ourselves to the rhythms of the natural world. We need to see the world in a different light, to understand the web of life as a symphony of interdependent parts. It's a bit like standing on a mountaintop, looking at the world below, seeing patterns and connections that we never noticed before because we were at a different vantage point. It's like learning to listen to a piece of music and hearing each note and instrument as part of a larger, more complex whole. That type of skill is something that needs to be developed and practiced. Perhaps we need to see time as a river flowing from the past to the future, carrying with it the debris of human activity and the rhythms of the natural world. We need to learn to appreciate the interconnectedness of all things, to see how a single action can have a ripple effect that reverberates across time and space. It's a big challenge, but it's one that we must take on if we want to ensure the long-term health and survival of our planet. To learn to see like a planet, we need to embrace a macroscope that reveals the world in all its complexity and beauty.
I can share now. If we could take a picnic down to the river edge and sit for 10 years, we would see the river ride like an eel. If we could sit for 50, we would see the eel jump and settle into a rhythm of rest and reset. Over 1,000 years, the eel would flip and flop, breaking up into many smaller eels and then combining on the other side of the plain. 1,000,000 years and the eel may freeze and dry altogether, but not forever. We would see all of this if we could sit still long enough. In Mataronga Māori, we have pūrako, narratives that help us connect with the land over many generations. The local stream down the back of my house tells of the taniwha lizard that lives there and flicks its tail without warning. The story is passed down generation to generation and guides us on where to be cautious of river flow and where not to build where the tail might flick. In the 2012 tsunami in Japan, as people were fleeing the coast, they found safe higher ground, but they also found ancient stone totems buried in soil and vegetation. These ancient totems were put there over 500 years earlier to warn future generations of the risk of tsunami and to let people know that downhill from this point was unsafe. But the lesson was lost in time and people moved on. How could that narrative have held through time? An artifact is only as useful as the narrative and storytelling method that we bind with it. We could use the performative practice and feel into the land and our relationship with it. But in thinking about methods of ritual, how do these maintain themselves in shifting climates and when seasons start to lose meaning? We still have the tides and the stars as our ever-present guides and our stories around them. Maybe that is why the stories were placed first in these lasting beings.
I can share next. I'll preface it by saying this is emphasis on the free. I didn't read this over, so this will be my first time hearing it. Time is a construct that I believe to be subjective, much like the weather and how it can be 70 degrees, but feel like 60 degrees due to other conditions. Time as measured by clocks can mark the passage of 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, but all of those time frames can move quickly or slowly depending on the conditions with which we are living through time. I like to play with time by thinking of the relationship between my breath and my heartbeat as a means to self-regulate my body's reaction to survival instincts like anxiety, which for me is expressed through rapid breathing and rapid heartbeats. I begin to count in my head at a slow and gradually changing pace to slow the pace of my heartbeat and regulate my body. By making an effort to communicate the slowing of time from my conscious mind to the physical body that my mind occupies, I see myself controlling my body's experience with time. Relating to the body, I think often of the concept of individual breath as a collective energy that participates in a larger global heartbeat. Our bodies act as conduits between oxygen and carbon monoxide, which feed the global ecosystem. In the same way that disruptive and unregulated breathing can have a detrimental effect on our physical body in the moment or over a sustained period of time, disruptions and unregulated practices in our physical world have a echoing butterfly effect on our global physical body. That's it.
I'll go next. I'm sitting in the woods below my house as I write, next to the vernal pool with its clots of eggs, flies landing on the table, our dog and cat exploring together parallel, missing our guinea hen who was part of our multi-species tribe. Every morning exploring a piece of our woods together, a tribe of explorers using their senses in a multiplicity of ways, remembering how well both Eartha dog and Billy cat tell time. They know with precision the biorhythms of our house culture day. My senses now pulled to acknowledge the call of the pileated woodpecker across the ridge, who has a double-walled skull with an airspace between, there's more, between. That's how the woodpecker can absorb the machine gun drilling with its beak into wood. The dog sits looking at the water. The surface is ticking with activity. Water gliders on the surface, on the greasy surface, frog eggs just under, dreaming of being tadpoles. Some days I can feel the respiration of the woods. Not today, though, there are other delights. What is time to a tadpole? A friend at dinner last night lamented that the spring peeper frogs in her past memory would coincide with the holiday. Crows, that's the other big sound I hear. I don't experience an out of sync time with the peepers, but I certainly get her dread in other observations. Still I try to stay in the gratitude moment.
Is there anybody else who wants to share? Well, thank you for that patchwork ecological network of musings on the idea of time and its relationship to scale. Anna Tsing states again that in each case of Matsutake ecology and economy she embarks on, she finds herself surrounded by patchiness. That is a mosaic of open-ended assemblages of entangled ways of life. That's what I hope to accomplish here today with this network of explorations, this free writing on a really complicated and embodied subject like time and spatiality and its relationship to the subject of post-human infrastructure. I love her idea of temporal rhythms and spatial arcs and found that very much in everybody's writing. And I wanted to invite our guest listeners today, Beatrice and Maurizio, to respond to what you've heard. But I thought before I do that, I would also love to ask Alexandra to maybe share a little bit about the reading session we did on Tuesday on James Bridle and specifically the chapter on thinking like a planet. I think she was going to potentially come up with some questions that she was left with from the series as a way to also weave that into temporality, since we're expanding this class to include reading James Bridle on collectively. And it's a new experience for her to also sort of Sherpa us through this text.
Thank you, Lauren. I will do my best, as I feel like my brain was attuned to something else during the live session. But yeah, I think for me, this chapter, Seeing Like a Planet, it just kind of like how James Bridle speaks about it, at least in the beginning, it just kind of made me think of perhaps how also disconnected I am from ecological rhythms in our urban infrastructures and the analog types of technologies that he gives there, like the logbook as a technology to keep track of seasonal change, or the wooden rod to keep track of the velocity of climate change, or even this idea of the embodied, like Beatrice, I call her B, so I'll call her Beatrice here. B talks about like the embodied experience of creating a time lapse versus watching a video of a time lapse. And I also realized that we also, I guess, and Mauricio perhaps can weave that back into his own perspective of like how perhaps James Bridle didn't address indigenous perspectives of time, of how that is present. And I realized that what I really understood by the homogenization of time actually comes from this book, which is called Einstein's Clock, Poincaré's Map. But there was a time in history where, you know, like perhaps even when Isaac Newton called time absolute, and then Einstein came in and with this relativity theory, and from an absolute time, there was relativity depending on your spatial position in time, in space. Time would have a different, there would be a different subjective understanding. And I think what James Bridle strictly refers to the homogenization of time as it connects to capitalism is this impetus back in history of coordinating time, of creating an absolute universal time, letting go of subjectivity and subjective perception. So yeah, I think that's, I hope I don't know if I'm doing a good job at explaining, but I think yes, control, exactly. And how that disconnected us from ecological rhythms. So I guess that's sort of, and yeah, during Tuesday, there are multiple perspectives that emerged, but I definitely think that Mauricio's was very, very valuable. So maybe he can talk about his own perspective of the reading.
Yes, or also go anywhere you want, Mauricio. You know, the beauty of this moment we share in time and space is vast. So it's to invite you and Beatrice as a guest listener is also to invite you to respond to the patchwork network of this free writing platform with people from around the world responding to this prompt. So feel free to weave in whatever you like as a listener.
Yes, hi all again. Well, congrats on all your written responses. They were great, so inspiring. Like it's good to be in a classroom again after a while. It reminds me how it is just inspiring, like it's a different time and we were talking about time, and it was and I have read both texts before, James Bridle for the session we had Tuesday, and it's seen for many times for my own research, and I consider it was a great match to put them together, because I think both of them are very accessible in their way, talking about very complex ideas. And I agree with you, Alexander, that that's the point of the Bridle's text, is talking about an harmonization of time, a metric way of counting time that is harmonization. But and also I don't know, maybe he also mentioned that like the perception of time for different people, different cultures is also related to language, like the way your mother language structures your brain is a way you perceive time. So yeah, it's just because it's very complicated and intricate, like as I was responding to Beatrice, like in a short comment, what she posed about that sometimes I don't, what is complicated about thinking is when we go for ambivalence or dichotomies that are not necessarily oppositions. That sometimes to me is tricky in Britto's writing, like when he goes like microscope and microscope, like these are not opposites for me. And this at the same time when he uses we humans, it's just a little too vague, too vast in considering many ways of being, as he is mentioning. But either way, it's a very inspiring text that I was thinking, how was artists, I mean, many of us here are artists, I believe, or maybe all, could contribute to that, because I think we are also dissidents by our own way about homogenizing time. We are trying to give our own contributions to ourselves, to audiences, about how we could perceive time in a way that is not dogmatic. So for instance, I'm also into composting for a while, as Kelly is. So I remember that when I was intrigued by composting, it was because composting was changing my way of perceiving time, because I was being reminded of the time. I was being reminded of not taking anything for granted. I was being reminded of the rottenness of everything, that the rules of this world are not being stayed by us humans. So like I was also writing some prompts in response to what I was hearing from you all. So like that I have this habit in my daily life of stopping by my transparent compost bin. So I like to have a transparent compost bin so I can see every morning how the banana peels are darkening, how the juice at the bottom of the bin is thickening. So it also reminds me of the raw materials that are there. So that are the avocado that comes from Guatemala, the pineapple that comes from Hawaii. And I believe that watching the cases, this perception exercise that I have been cultivating over years, and I try to translate it to my art and educative projects, because somehow I believe that reminds the audience of the rottenness of everything, how intricate life and death are, and are one of way of subverting a way of perceiving time, and as a continued time for labor, for consumption, as stated by capitalist economies. So, and or even like bringing composting to art practice, like how composting can be the opposite of composition, that is kind of one of the how can I say that, the
decomposition.
Yeah, like how composition is so related to modernism, and how can we go away from modernism by, instead of making, undoing, decomposing, groundbreaking, destroying, or thinking at mycelium speed, perceiving at the microbe scale. I don't know. Yeah, and and for me, what is very special about Ernest Singh writing is because she's proposing a way of narrating that is, how can I tell a story that is multi-directional, multi-plot storytelling that entangles various beings and various scales of economies and environments, and she's showing us how to make it, because her book is written that way. So yeah. So that's it. It's very inspiring. So to have this structure in this class today, it was a great response to End Things, because we had this patchwork here, like from all the perspectives. I like to see the Zoom in the gallery view. So that was the image that I had, like that, from all these different responses from very different contexts coming from this small screens in a grid.
Thank you so much, Maurizio.
Thank you.
Beatrice, would you like to offer any reflections to listening?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like my mind has been racing through so many different there's so many different threads, but I was just thinking, Marcio, about the Zoom grid as well. And, you know, I think there's a way in which, you know, kind of coming out of the pandemic, there was a kind of association with rigidity and distance that I had felt in seeing this image of the grid, but this has been a really wonderful, I think, way to kind of reorient thinking about patchiness and this kind of how we can use technology as a way to connect and not just take it, you know, as face value in a certain way. I was also thinking a lot about, you know, from my own experience coming from you know, a kind of very academic, scientific, you know, background in terms of the classroom. Like I've very much appreciated the many different experiences and kind of modes of thinking and being that everyone has brought in today. And also, yeah, the thing I keep coming back to and thinking about these two readings is really this idea of productivity and the kind of capitalist structure and drive to produce and consume that I think has been so tied up with technology. And I think is something that I sense a little, you know, I thought the Bridal chapter was really thought-provoking in a lot of ways, but there's a bit of a lean towards a kind of technological determinism that I sense in the piece. And you know, this way that he's kind of saying, you know, we got here because of the technology, right? And I think to some degree that resonates with me, but I think about, again, coming back to this idea of like process, like, right, the technology is not telling us what to do, right? We're bringing a certain sense of what we're trying to get out of technologies when we engage with them. And I think this is especially important in relation to what basically Singh is saying, particularly in this chapter that I think we all read for today, that it's not, you know, the capitalism rests on entanglement, right? It's not just that, it's almost like, I think she's kind of provoking to say it's not just enough to recognize that the entanglement is there, but to really change the way that we operate. What do we do with that entanglement? Because this capitalist structure is already built on that entanglement. And so I just think a lot about, you know, something I'm working through in my own practice, particularly like in a lab context, right? Like, what does it look like to, and something that I am kind of starting to increasingly look towards the perspective that artists can bring and the art space as challenging the kind of status quo and especially a lot of the kind of science and technology dominated realms is, you know, what are we using these tools for? Is it, you know, I think a lot of my colleagues would say, oh, we're here to publish papers, right? We're here to like, get some kind of basically this commodity out of the work that we're doing. And thus, you know, if I told some of my lab mates, you know, oh, well, why would you consider, you know, drawing this time lapse, you know, these cells that you're looking at, as opposed to snapping pictures of them? They would say, oh, well, why would I do that? That would take so much time. You know, like, and what I'm really here to do is to kind of get to that, you know, commodifiable like endpoint result that I can then, you know, go out, share into the world and, you know, build my career on and actually turn into like literal financial gain. So yeah, it's something that I'm trying to push myself to start doing, is to really, you know, not take the technologies that the microscope, specifically the digitized microscope, which is, if you go into most labs nowadays, it's microscopes that are hooked up to computers that you can just enter your time parameters into and hit go, and then you leave for the night and you come back, right, and you have this really amazing but almost overwhelmingly rich set of images. And how can we kind of think about how to break down what we do with those images, not just extract the data from them and turn it into something that we can commodify in some way, which is, I think, what Bridal is getting at a bit with his discussion of quantification and a kind of resisting quantification of ecologies.
Something also that caught my attention in Bridal's was that he mentioned that how plants are already responding and adapting to climate change, and we are not. And so that's also a question that we could ask, like about how this uniformization of time, or this time perception that is being posed, how this is disconnecting us from our collective intelligence to respond to this kind of situations. Like we are not responding as a collective intelligent being as plants and many others are.
Well, thank you, Maurizio, and thank you, Beatrice. And I just wanted to open the floor for any crosstalk. I know, Jack, you had a comment for Beatrice at the beginning, and I was saying, wait, now would be a good time if anybody has any questions or crosstalk between us, or deepening of questions of anything shared. Let's open the floor. Jack, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciated the emphasis Beatrice put on instrumentation. I suppose for me, I was put a lot of weight on time as perceived by ecology and the different organisms and pieces of the environment, and how there's a new conjuring of time from that ecological space. And then Beatrice was focusing on instrumentation as a way to visualize or understand those ecological or biological processes, the embryo, for instance, being this window into the past. And so I just wanted to emphasize and express my appreciation for like a similar affinity that Beatrice has for instrumentation as a lens, a portal opener, to shine light on these processes that may seem invisible at first. And so, yeah, but I'm not someone who works entirely with a vast array of instrumentation. I feel like I work with there's so many different types of instruments. So to hear the micro instrumentation perspective was really interesting, and I appreciated that. But I also share an affinity for instrumentation, and I suppose I overlooked that in the text, that it was about instrumentation, and I was more looking at these biological processes. But it's becoming clear to me in the class, this intersection of biological and ecological processes, and how instrumentation allows us to perceive time in a certain way within those organic processes. Yeah, that's my reflection.
Can I just add on to that, Jack? My relationship with instrumentation as well is that it's very easy to lose physical scale when you're working in a digital world, and yeah, time as well. But that when you're able to zoom in and zoom out so rapidly, we lose what is contextual in the work that we're creating, which is ourselves.
Well, I think it's a very good time for a break. I'd like to thank Alexandra so much for inviting Beatrice to be our guest listener. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the platform with us, and also wanted to thank Alexandra for a review of our first session in Learning and Mending on James Bridle's chapter on Thinking Like a Planet, and say, please join us next Tuesday for the second augmented post-human infrastructure learning and mending class. Alexandra will put the subject in the chat bar so you can see it. And I wanted to thank Mauricio Chavez for joining us as a guest listener as well, and for your synergy with all of us. It's like, I feel like we're on the same wavelength. Whenever I hear you talk, I feel like a hum in my mind of, oh, we're flowing in the same, we're flowing in the same space. And finally, I want to thank all of you for just blowing my mind continually with your writing and your thoughts and the depth of it. It's scary to teach. I've only been, this is the end of my second year of trying different ways of approaching this original thinking of post-human infrastructure, and it's really important that we co-create this pedagogy. I don't think there are any experts in this field. So being able to uplift this practice by deep listening to you all is something I feel very grateful for. So let's take a 10-minute break wherever you are. I really recommend moving. We've been sitting and listening in a deep way. I really recommend moving or jumping or getting your blood flowing or getting a glass of water before we do the last half hour of our class. I have attempted lecture 2 on this series, which is partly my response to our collective speculative ecology that I sent everybody to read last week, and I spent some deep time with it, whatever that means, sleeping time, thinking time. I printed it out and put it by my bed. It was the first thing that I saw every morning. So I saw different things, and I've been drawing things and listening to it. So it's an interpretive lecture where I'm kind of weaving together Bridle and Singh with our speculative ecology. So we'll start right up with that in 10 minutes. And yeah, and Beatrice and Maurizio, you're welcome to join us again. But I realize we've taken more, we took an hour and a half of your time instead of an hour. So please feel free also to, you know, not join the lecture part, but you're welcome to join if you like. So we'll see you at 11:30 Pacific time. 1:30, is that right? East Coast time, 2:30 East Coast time. God knows what time in Europe it is, or New Zealand, but we'll see you in 10 minutes, either case. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome back. I've got some California sage, native sage, and some jasmine. Amazing combination. Ah. So, will everybody turn their camera on just for a minute so I can see that you're there, so I can know we're back? Thank you. Okay. So, lecture 2. I'm going to begin with the idea of critique, because the idea of critique gets so lost in the idea of criticism. And I wanted to sort of really explore the idea of critique as a method of disciplined and systemic study of a written or oral discourse. It doesn't have to be just about fault finding and negative judgment. In the philosophical tradition, it's also meant a methodological practice of doubt and recognition of merit. And with this in mind, we can move beyond the short attention spans of our knowledge-making technologies and attune ourselves to the temporal dimension of the web of life and the rhythm of change caused by climate change and anthropocentric activities. The quote from Bridle, that time has always been an imaginary concept, and it matters who imagines it. We need a macroscope and not just a microscope to see at a far vaster scale in space and time than we're used to. What time-based technologies, stories, and tools do we need to create or reimagine to expand our conscious attention and connect us to the web of life? In my own art practice, I feel and have felt the threat of nuclear annihilation from the early 20th century still hanging over me. But now we also have to pay the price for the unbridled ambitions of capitalism, the cult of growth, the control of resources, extraction at all cost, warmongering with its cousin of the surveillance state. How can we as artists and makers create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy? A new consumerism raises questions about sustainability. How can data centers with their massive power loads or undersea cables that connect us be a sustainable infrastructure? We live with a post-human infrastructure mostly created for a new incentive landscape that we have co-shaped. Those factors that have co-shaped it include climate change, disease, and technology, guiding us to a different path. Trees, quote from last week's writing, become an obsession, and we envision censoring forests and ourselves, translating knowledge through an empathy interface. We cultivate nutrient-rich wetlands that support birds, mammals, fish, fungi, and bacteria. But we are not separate. We prioritize intimacy. We grow gardens, often as a new form of resistance. We notice. We notice it's a lovely thing, quote, when violets show themselves. We ask questions like, as an Indigenous person in diaspora, I find myself at a crossroads of storytelling and redefining what it means to be land-based when so much land has been stolen from us. Yet, amidst the man-made destruction, there is a sense of post-apocalyptic reconnection between our bodies and spirits. We come up with another principle for a speculative ecology. We discover that disturbance in ecology is a key to biodiversity. A season of unusual storms in the West wreaks havoc on our infrastructure and our power grids, but it also brings a rebound. And we discover the remnants of past catastrophes and the seeping oil in the earth. We recognize that it's a resource for the next generation, but also a source of marginalization for those who live amongst and amidst these toxic sites. Oil painting itself comes from this oil, and oil and randomness merge in a web of collective imagination. A band, Fuck You, Pay Us, a brilliant name for a punk band, reminds us of a past in which some people were violently ripped from their homeland to serve as slaves to build a capitalist empire. Real reparation work needs to be part of any speculative ecology's guiding principles. And in our writing, some good questions arise about this new consumerism. We are all cultivating wetlands, nutrient-rich wetlands that exist and support birds and mammals, both figuratively and in real time. Birds and mammals above and so below fish, fungi, and bacteria. We are not separate. We are growing gardens often as a new form of graffiti with seed bombs launched with balloons and condoms or with our arms. We are rewilding space. We are reclaiming what has been lost. We salvage and we hack the modernist grid into an ecological system where office towers become vertical gardens and boulevards become tree canopies. We embrace the biosphere as the driving force of design decision and engage a new economic model that fosters a better relationship with the planet. Our class collective speculative ecology explores the idea of creating art and making it in a way that responds to the scale of destruction in our societies. The text touches on various aspects of scale, including time, principles of keeping time, such as serving tea, and the role of sanctuary in time. Tea farmers in our text are portrayed as thinking small and using alternative mediums and materials to create tea spaces where people can connect and share their traumas. Our text highlights the importance of preserving music and places, preserving places and stories in places like Armenia that may have previously been overlooked. The poetics of brush clearing are also explored, and native botany is identified as holding the key to landscape. Brush clearing allows for research and discovery of the beauty of the earth and our connection to it, but also raises questions for Indigenous people in diaspora about what it means to be cleaning land when so much land has been stolen. Our text notes that amidst man-made destruction, there is a sense of post-apocalyptic reconnection with our bodies and between each other's bodies and spirits. The exploration of disturbance leads us to discover the fertility and abundance all around us. The remnants of past catastrophes and the seeping oil in the earth are seen as a resource for the next generation. The potential for creating sustainable infrastructure is still there. Constructing floating wetlands and nutrient wetlands is going on. Our text concludes with a call to embrace the biosphere. James Bridle, a British artist and writer, has explored the relationship between forests and time in his work. He argues that forests are intimately connected to time in a way that humans often overlook. For example, forests contain trees that have been growing for hundreds or even thousands of years, which give these forests a unique relationship to time in comparison to human life. Bridle also explores how the concept of deep time, geological time scales that are different and difficult for humans to comprehend can be visualized through the study of forests. In the context of these undersea cables that are today connecting us, it's important that we acknowledge the disturbance, the phenological disturbance of playing with the ocean floor in any way. Phenology is the study of the timing of biological events in nature, such as the timing of bird migrations or the blooming of flowers. These events are often closely tied to the seasonal cycles and ocean currents. So undersea cables can have an impact on phenological time, on these natural cycles by disturbing the seafloor and disrupting the behavior of marine animals. Reframing ruin as an act of salvage accumulation is something that Anna Tsing writes about. It also highlights the potential for creative practices to create social and economic value in marginalized communities. By using local resources and repurposing waste materials, we artists and designers create new opportunities for economic development and community empowerment. This is particularly important in areas that have been impacted by economic or environmental decline, as salvage accumulation provides a way to create value and resilience in the face of difficult circumstances. Anna Tsing, theorist, anthropologist, storyteller, feminist, and Matsutake enthusiast, investigates this urgent matter, the possibility of life in a capitalist ruin. Just as Tsing's title suggests, the book tells the story of perseverance of life in spite of the colonial and capitalist destruction that terrorizes all earthly beings. The critter that guides Tsing's story about the unexpected emergence of life is the wild Matsutake mushroom. After the atomic bomb that depleted Hiroshima in 1945, Matsutakes were said to be the first living thing that emerged from the blasted landscape. Central to the figure of Matsutake and to Tsing's thesis is the notion of precarity. Precarity. For Tsing, Hiroshima is an event that sheds light on the precarity of the modern world, and the flourishing of the Matsutake out of such precarity emphasizes the nature of nature. The nature of nature is abundance. it is vital to note that Singh is absolutely not saying, look, life continues in the face of destruction, all will be well, resume the depletion. Singh is rather inviting us on a journey with her into the curious, forgotten realms of this new world, plagued by the fate of precarity. And it is the Matsutake's willingness to emerge in the blasted landscapes that allows us to explore the blasted ruin that has become our collective home. Throughout our journey, humans are not the main characters. Indeed, the relationships certain humans hold with certain more than human beings is part of this story. But this relationship is no more important than the relationship between Matsutake and pine, their preferred host, or pine and nematodes, one of the critters whose lifestyle threatens that of the Matsutake. Singh lets the story of these non-human relationships shine, illuminating how Matsutake nurture trees, allowing forests to thrive in ecological ruin. Ultimately, her book is about landscapes of collaborative survival. Singh frames chapter 11, which we will read this next week, with the question, can I show landscape as the protagonist of an adventure in which humans are only one kind of participant? Landscape here signals places for patchy assemblages. Patchy assemblages are key to this text because the text itself is a patchy assemblage and the story it tells is also a patchy assemblage. Singh states that in each case of Matsutake ecology and economy she embarks on, she finds herself surrounded by patchiness, that is, a mosaic of open-ended assemblages of entangled ways of life, with each further entering into a mosaic of temporal rhythms and spatial arcs. Landscape then means the space in which unpredictable, spontaneous, and thus patchy mosaics of life can be found. Landscape is simultaneously a physical space and a story. The landscape that Singh is particularly concerned with are those that have been disturbed. Disturbance, simply put, is a change in the environmental conditions that causes a pronounced change in ecosystem. Disturbance can renew ecologies as well as destroy them. Disturbance matters to Singh because it initiates a story of the life of landscape, and in this case, the forest. Disturbance is unfolding all around us in this time of precarity, which means that there is always potential for disturbance to facilitate transformative encounters and catalyze new landscape assemblages. These transformative encounters are not just by chance of scientific odds. Throughout her book, Singh speaks to the agency and intentionality of more than human beings. Disturbances are and can be coordinated. Furthermore, it is out of the relationship between life forms within disturbance ecologies that new patchy assemblages blossom, and these patchy assemblages are landscapes in which Singh finds the possibility of life in ruins. By planting corn in a former train yard, not a cornfield, a work I did in 2005 and 2006, repurposed a contaminated space and turned it into something productive and valuable. The corn not only symbolized the pre-train yard's fertility of a floodplain that would regularly be a dangerous spot for anything to be in a storm, but it also pointed at the importance of that flood in creating the biodiversity of the ecozone. The corn that I use helped to remediate the soil that had been brought down to a point of non-fertility by a train yard being bizarrely placed on top of a floodplain during early colonization. I think this is a good example of salvage accumulation, as it demonstrates how discarded and polluted spaces can be transformed into productive and regenerative environments through creative and resourcing practices. We need to reframe ruin as an act of salvage accumulation. We need to reframe ruin in our language, because we can highlight the potential for creative practice to create social and economic value in marginalized community and marginalized places. Using local resources and repurposing waste materials, we artists and we designers can create new opportunities for human and more than human beings to thrive. That is lecture 2. So, any questions? Thank you for the heart emojis. I really appreciate it. I wanted to really uplift your writing and try and spend some time with it in terms of sort of weaving. It's easy to default to the prose, like Sing and Bridal, but I also want to talk about, you know, moving our class cohort into the position of creating a speculative ecological model ourselves. And I think we're saying and sharing a lot, so I really tried to spend some time incorporating our writing into this lecture, and I hope it made some sense. So this week, I'm going to actually use this prompt of sending you the chapter 11 to read, of staying with Sing a little bit longer and reading chapter 11 in her Mushroom at the End of the World. And we will also be adding the next chapter in Bridal. So we're going to do a kind of 2-week Bridal Sing read along. But I'm going to ask you to do some deep mapping this week as well. So rather than going into text and free text, I'm going to ask you to go get lost somewhere in the world, somewhere in the world that you live in. Get lost with no expectation. Don't go someplace that you know already, okay? I'd love you to get lost someplace, and I'd love you to come back and write about it. Do some free writing when you get back about what you discovered about the place you live, or go someplace you don't live and get lost, so that we can bring that into, surprise yourself about thinking about where you are. And before we close for today, Alexandra, would you like to talk about next week's Bridal reading at all?
Sure. So next week, we're going to go, so this week we read chapter 4, which explore technology through ways of being in time. And next week, we're going back to the introduction of the book, and we're actually going to start reading the book in order. And the introduction is called More Than Human. And in this chapter, Bridle will articulate his own lived experience where he started to question what technology is or what intelligence is and who possesses it. And in this chapter, he will explain how a particular type of intelligence, artificial intelligence, meets the web of life, the surface of the earth itself, and how corporate intelligence is using this AI to extract and to optimize and to focus on processes of growth and extraction. So, and then we're in this chapter, he also introduces what he calls an ecology of technology and how to reimagine technology through ecological thought, and introduces the idea of the more than human world. And yeah, so that's.
So thank you, Alexandra. So just to remind you, if anybody wants to read that collectively, we'll be reading it Tuesday at 5:30 Pacific time on Metabolic Studios Learning and Mending platform. But we will also post that chapter in on the Alternative Art School whatever it is that we posted on. I can't remember what category it's on, so that you have it as well as the Bridle chapter. And I wanted to sort of kind of close today by sharing a little bit about this idea of phenological time, because I think it's this kaleidoscope idea that time tells itself by so many different things, like the cycle of the moon is something that we started this class around. But there's also, you know, the blooming of a flower and the amount of time a seed takes to germinate into a plant that then releases pollen, and then the way the seasons may play in, you know, having things lie dormant until they reemerge. And it's a very interesting way to think about landscape, is to think about this idea of phenological time and all the different living systems that tell you what time it is, depending on your own practices and the cadence of the environment that you are living in. I know that many people who travel say that when they go to different cultures, one of the things they notice right away is that time has a completely different meaning in other places. So one of the ideas for your homework this week to go get lost is to also suspend time in that. So unlike the 10-minute writing prompt that I think very few of you stuck to by the depth of your responses, this particular homework assignment will also be to think about, you know, phenological time. Instead of 10 minutes, think about however long you're meant to be lost, get lost. And then come back and do that writing and really let yourself have some of that, you know, time, take time to take time out kind of time, and think about freedom and exodus from, you know, this kind of ritual reenactment that that Jewish people are acknowledging, you know, in this narrative of leaving Egypt. But just leaving time itself is also an enactment of liberation in many ways. We have 1 minute, speaking of time. So I hope that you all enjoyed the second session as much as I did. And you know, see you next week, or see it one place or another. Maybe we'll run into each other in our get lost spaces.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everybody so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
You know,
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.